The General Assembly will now hear the statement by His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, Head of State of the Central African Republic. I would like to ask Protocol to escort His Excellency to the rostrum. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor of welcoming to the United Nations His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, Head of State of the Central African Republic, and I would like to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As I take the floor before the 76th regular session of the United Nations General Assembly on behalf of the Central African Republic, I would like to warmly congratulate His Excellency Abdullah Shahid on his brilliant election to the presidency of this eminent assembly, and wish him every success in the discharge of this noble mission. Your brilliant election to the presidency of this session is a well-deserved tribute to your qualities and an honor that speaks to the quality of your services and to the quality of your country, the Republic of the Maldives. And here I must also hail President Volkan Bozkir on the excellent work he accomplished under exceptional circumstances during the 75th session which just ended. Mr. President, our 76th session is being held around a theme of poignant topicality, which is, and I quote, building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainability, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of persons, and revitalize the United Nations. This crisis, which continues to pose a challenge to the community of nations, can only be overcome if we have a more tangible form of international solidarity. And here I must pay a heartfelt tribute to the memory of the direct and indirect victims of this pandemic. With determination, despite limited resources, the Central African Republic has set about containing the epidemic, the disastrous effects of which on all sectors of our national economy have jeopardized our growth predictions for 2020 and 2021, undermining our socio-economic gains under the National Plan for Recovery and Peace Building in Central Africa. Estimates show that if the crisis is brought to an end in the next 6 months, the national economy will have lost 5.8% of its projected GDP. However, if the crisis should extend beyond 6 months, this loss will be 8.9% of GDP. To limit the effects of the pandemic, my government is ensuring that we are safeguarding the capacities to finance our development. And here we are pressing ahead with our reform of our public finance management system, which has been if strictly implemented, the strict implementation of which enabled us to conclude a second program, 2020 to 2022, with the IMF as part of its extended credit facility. Now, to tackle the shocks caused by COVID-19, we must strengthen our population's resilience and invest more in a health watch system and tirelessly pursue collective awareness raises. And further, we must do everything to achieve collective immunity while intensifying our search for preventive and curative medicines as well as effective medicines. Universal access to vaccines for the countries that are least developed must be an international security priority in the name of the fundamental principles of human solidarity. Mr. President, mobilization against COVID 19 should not, however, conceal the other challenges that we are faced with, individually as states, but also collectively as an international community. One of the biggest challenges facing us as we seek to meet the needs of the planet collectively and individually is the preservation of our environment, which is threatened by various types of harmful emissions and climatic and atmospheric pollutants. It is now clear that human activity is the main cause of climate change. We consume more than what nature can offer us in the course of 1 year because of our increasingly divergent interests. Global warming, due to an excessive production of greenhouse gases, leading to climate changes which themselves cause floods during the rainy season as well as water shortages. The overexploitation of fish stocks, our forestry resources and agricultural resources are exacerbating the degradation of our ecosystems. We have the historic responsibility to preserve our future generations by changing our behaviors and ensuring that we immediately roll out a governance framework that will enable us to achieve coordinated and sustainable management of our natural resources. My country has contributed modestly by coming up with a national sustainable development strategy in parallel with its definition under the CAR Vision 2050, which is part and parcel of its environmental policy letter based on investment in education and in establishing equitable environmental justice. Mr. President, these last 75 years allowed our organization to make creditable progress thanks to the intelligent pooling of our efforts. And faced with new challenges, sweeping reforms of our organs are essential for the United Nations to remain the forum par excellence for multilateralism. And to attain these reforms, one major step remains that of redressing the historic inequality which has deprived and continues to deprive the African continent of a permanent seat on the Security Council. It is here and nowhere else that the solutions that preserve peace and international security must blossom in the respect for the values, principles, and commitments enshrined in our charter. This charter, whose soul is the respect for human rights and which resonates strongly with my country, is enshrined in the preamble of our Constitution under the principle known as Zo Kwe Zo, which in our Sango language is an affirmation of the sacred nature of human beings. Our determined action to fight impunity is demonstrated by our accession to international mechanisms to protect human dignity. And as a result of this, once we received the report from MINUSCA's Human Rights Division alleging cases of violations allegedly committed by our armed forces and their allies during counteroffensives and raids on our national territory against the rebels of a would-be coalition of patriots for change, CPC, we decided immediately to shed all light possible by setting up on the 4th of May 2021 a special national commission of inquiry tasked with shedding light on the alleged serious crimes, human rights, and international humanitarian law violations, which have been set out in our initial feedback submitted to MINUSCA. Furthermore, operationalization of the Truth, Justice, Reparation, and Reconciliation Commission is a major contribution to the success of the peace process, national reconciliation, and is complementary to our efforts to tackle impunity. My government is committed to preserving constitutional order, our commitment to democracy, and building peace and stability. Disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration reform under our security sector reform, and initiatives to enable the massive return of refugees and IDPs, acceleration of implementation of our post-conflict development plan, are all efforts underway in CAR, and we are now preparing for local elections, the last of which were held in 1988. Mr. President, scrupulous respect for our commitments in the political agreement for peace and reconciliation remains our guiding principle, and to the armed forces of the CPC that had signed this agreement and which are continuing to commit atrocities against our civilians through my voice, the Central African Republic is calling for unequivocal solidarity in the name of the principles of our Charter: equality, promotion of peace, respect, and sovereignty of states. The positive momentum of national reconstruction can only be sustained if we reduce definitively the spoilers. And from this rostrum, through the sound of my voice, the Central African Republic is renewing its call for the total lifting of the embargo, which is unjustly weighing on our national army and preventing it from fulfilling its executive mission of protecting our civilian population, protecting our territory. My guiding principle remains bringing together my compatriots to prosper our Central Africa in a spirit of sharing and transcending all divides. I confirmed it by calling for civil society to attend a Republican dialogue, the results of which will contribute to strengthening the option for peace set out in the PRCA. Sir, it would be remiss of me if I closed without a tribute to the peacekeepers of MINUSCA and the allied Russian and Rwandese forces that have defended fundamental rights, democracy, and peace in Central Africa and paid the ultimate price. To all guarantors and facilitators of the peace agreement, including the African Union, ECOWAS, ICGLR, MINUSCA, and the European Union, the Central African nation expresses its abiding gratitude. To the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, I wish to express my deep appreciation for his unstinting commitment to peace and development in the world, and more specifically in Central African Republic. I cherish the hope that you will remain mobilized in this endeavor, this move of international solidarity alongside the people of Central Africa Republic in their quest for peace and economic recovery. I wish you every success in your work. Long live international cooperation and solidarity. Thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens...
On behalf of the General Assembly, I thank the President of the Central African Republic for his statement, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Je donne maintenant la parole au...
I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia to introduce the statement by their head of state.